iniciar la grabación. Y bueno, pues mi nombre es Arlen Solodkin, soy directora del Instituto de Bienestar Integral, un instituto que se formó hace aproximadamente 6 años con la finalidad de poder brindar herramientas y programas al mundo de habla hispana que puedan ayudar a elevar el bienestar de las personas, el bienestar de las organizaciones y contribuir, por supuesto, al bienestar de nuestra sociedad y de nuestros países. Y es para mí un gusto el poder compartir con tal Ben-Shahar, gran líder en el campo de la psicología positiva, de los estudios de la felicidad, pues una trayectoria ya de colaboración de 6 años en donde hemos podido llegar a muchísimos países y contribuir con muchas personas a través del certificado en estudios de la felicidad. Tal Ben-Shahar, como ustedes probablemente ya conocen, pues es líder mundial en estudios de la felicidad, es el fundador de Happiness Studies Academy, de Potential Life, de Happier TV, es autor de muchos libros que han sido bestsellers y sus enseñanzas han llegado alrededor del mundo. Dentro del certificado en estudios de la felicidad contamos con estudiantes de más de 50 países distintos y es una comunidad vibrante y me consta por la experiencia que tengo pues de estar cerca de él, el saber que sus enseñanzas verdaderamente ayudan a transformar la vida de muchísimas personas alrededor del mundo. Él se ha propuesto el promover la idea de crear una revolución de la felicidad por el impacto que tiene la felicidad en la vida de la gente. Entonces es un gran placer poder estar aquí el día de hoy. Bienvenido, Tal. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Arlen. It's very good to be here.
La sesión se va a estar traduciendo de manera simultánea, entonces yo voy a hablar en inglés también y vamos a abrir el espacio para que ustedes puedan hacer todas las preguntas que quieran. Vamos a empezar con una breve introducción y seguiremos con todas las preguntas. Okay, Tal. So now I'll speak in English. It's such a pleasure to have you here with us. You're part of our family, and I'm very glad that your teachings have become part of the Spanish-speaking world because we need it so much. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Arlen. You know, it's a substitute, not a very good substitute, but a substitute for my very frequent visits to Mexico and Colombia and Peru and Chile and Brazil and all around, you know, Latin America, which I miss terribly.
Yes, I know you've said that before, and we miss you too, but this is good enough for now. So
well, it will have to do.
Yes. So Tal, you know, we developed or created this opportunity for tonight so that people can, you know, ask you directly some of their own questions, and actually some attendees wrote me about, you know, some questions already. But I wanted to start by, you know, asking you about the fact that many people, when they hear the word happiness, they have some reaction to it, like as if it is like a superficial word. And I think sometimes it is related to the fact that we equate happiness with high intensity and high pleasure emotions, you know, like excitement or, you know, being really interested and enthusiastic about some things, and for that sometimes we need special events to happen in our lives, like getting married or having a child or a graduation. So that leaves the happiness kind of on the side of something that happens very, you know, seldom and not so much in our hands. It's not related to something we can create. But I think happiness is much more than that. And I wanted to see what you think about that.
Yeah. There's a great deal of misunderstanding about what happiness is and is not. And in a way, you have two extremes. One extreme is about happiness being dependent on some great event. When I win the lottery, then I'll be happy. When I finally find my prince or princess, then I'll be happy. When I achieve this, then I'll be happy. So this is one extreme. The other extreme is about just experiencing it in the moment. I had an ice cream, I was so happy, or I'm on the beach doing nothing, I'm so happy. And neither of these extremes capture what happiness is about. Happiness is about a deep sense of well-being that includes various variables. Yes, it includes the pleasure of maybe eating an ice cream or a gourmet meal. It includes the joy that we get running around on the beach or watching a comedy. That certainly contributes to happiness. What also contributes to happiness is the other extreme. When we win the lottery, yes, of course we'll be, happier for it. When we, find the partner that we've been yearning for, yes, of course we'll be happier for it. But neither of the extremes provide a deep sense of well-being and happiness, certainly not for long. Because, they're lying on the beach, okay, it feels good now, 5 seconds later, it's gone. Winning the lottery feels good now, but a month later, that's gone too. And the interesting and important question is, how do we create a sustained sense of well-being? Now, very importantly, a sustained sense doesn't mean that we're always experiencing a high. Sustained sense, there are ups and downs, but how can we raise this level? The base level, so that instead of experiencing ups and downs here, we experience the ups and downs of life here. And how do we do that? We do that through cultivating various characteristics, traits, or elements in our life. It's, for example, by cultivating a sense of meaning and purpose in life. And that does lead to a sustained level of well-being. It's about meditating or being mindful regularly, day in and day out, not just when I'm on the beach and not just when I, once a month or once a year when I go to a meditation retreat. Ongoing mindfulness. It's about exercising regularly, 3, 4, 5 times a week. It's about eating healthfully. It's about continuously learning and asking questions. It's about cultivating and investing day in and day out in our relationships. And finally, it's about embracing the pain that comes with life and about enjoying and appreciating and being grateful for what we have. So all these things together are what will raise our happiness levels beyond that spike on the beach or beyond that higher spike when we win the lottery, if we ever win it. So this is how we can actually sustain and grow happiness over time. Now, do we need to do everything that I spoke about, gratitude and mindfulness and find a sense of purpose and be curious and cultivate? No, even if we choose 1 or 2 of these elements and invest in them consistently, day in and day out, invest in our relationships because they matter. Day in and day out, practice mindfulness or exercise regularly, choosing 1 or 2, the ones that speak to us most, the ones that attract us to them most. And if we do them regularly, that's how we raise our levels of happiness.
So what I'm listening to tell it gives me hope because it kind of shows that you are able to choose what do you want to focus on and to cultivate some habits, and that's actually a trait that increases hopefulness because it is about becoming an active agent in your own life, self-efficacious, if you will.
That's exactly right. And that hope is so important. The difference between sadness and depression is that depression is sadness without hope. We all experience sadness at times, sometimes 10 times a day, but it becomes depression when we lose the hope. Mm-hmm. And just knowing about all the things, and there are many things that we can do to become happier, just knowing about them, that in and of itself introduces hope into the equation.
Yeah, and actually, I was thinking about starting with some questions later, but actually, two of the questions that I got had to do with the fact that, these people ask about how can you help someone with depression or with ADHD become happy? How would you start helping someone that has lost hope?
Mm. The first distinction that I would like to make is between happy and happier. Mm-hmm. So when people ask me, Tal, are you happy? I'm not exactly sure how to answer that question. Why? Because I don't think there is a point before which one is happy and after which one is unhappy, or vice versa. Rather, it's a continuum. The continuum means that I can certainly be happier than I was yesterday or 20 years ago, and I certainly want to be happier than I am today, a year from now. So it's about becoming happier. So the question is, how can we help a person who's depressed or with ADHD become happier? In other words, do better. And it means even a little bit better. But how can we help them do better? So the first thing to realize is that sometimes people need help beyond what the science of happiness can provide, can offer. If someone is clinically depressed, well, then they need professional help. Then they need a therapist and or they need medication and a form of intervention that goes beyond just the things that I spoke about. Having said that, even therapists today, even clinical psychologists today are using more and more of the tools from positive psychology, from the science of happiness in their treatment. What are they using, for example? Regular physical exercise. There's a lot of research showing that regular physical exercise has the same effect on our psychological well-being as our most powerful psychiatric medication. During this period when the world is in pandemic and stress levels are so high and depression levels are at an all-time high, to me, perhaps the most important thing that we should emphasize, whether it's in ourselves or our children, or one of the most important things, is being physically active. I don't ask my children to see their report card. I don't look at it. I don't ask them how they're doing in school. If they want, they show me, they tell me. If there's a problem, the teacher calls me. But what I do ask them every day, and what I make sure of every day, is that they exercise. Why? Because I know how important exercise is always, and especially during times when stress levels are high, when depression levels are high. And by the way, physical exercise is one of the best antidotes to ADHD, to attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. In fact, one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons why ADHD is becoming so pervasive today, so common today, is because children are exercising less, are moving less, are spending much more time in front of the screen. So physical exercise is critical. another thing that's critical is listening and being listened to. You know, you go to a therapist. What are you doing for 50 minutes? You're talking. You're being listened to. So just talking, telling our story, that in and of itself can help a great deal. But once again, I go back, sometimes professional help, professional therapy, or a psychiatrist and medication are necessary.
Yeah, well, it's really important to use, as you sometimes mention in your lectures, the power of the and, right? It's not only one thing, it's a set of different tools that we can use to navigate through difficult moments. But sometimes helping a person who is very depressed feels very hopeless when you are standing next to that person who is experiencing a very hard time. So how, how or what would you suggest for the person that is standing on their side?
Yeah. You know, one of the things that have unfortunately been historically neglected is the mental health of the caregiver. You know, the mental health of the person who's trying to help others, because you know, we have in our brains, in our heads, we have mirror neurons. Mirror neurons reflect what we encounter. So for example, if someone smiles, we're likely to smile. We're likely actually to feel better. If someone is constantly depressed, that will also affect us, whether we're professional therapists with a lot of experience or someone with zero experience. It will have an effect on us. And the question is, what do we do? How do we deal with it? How can we be in a place where we can help the other person rather than be brought down with them? And the key here is, as you pointed out a few minutes ago, the and. We can deal with difficulties. We can deal with hardships. We can deal with challenges. We're built for it. We're built for it physically. We're built for it psychologically. And we can do that, and we can sustain that hardships, difficulties, and challenges if we also have time to recover. You know, it's just like we can be awake if we also sleep. You know, we can go without food if we also have food before. We need the and. And what we need to do when we're helping others is we also need to make sure that we take care of ourselves, of our needs, our psychological needs, our physiological needs. You know, there's wonderful research by Wharton professor Adam Grant on givers, people who give. And what he finds in his research is that in organizations, you generally find givers who are extremely successful. In the same organization, you find givers, again, these are people who are generous, who are kind, who are the least successful. So you have givers at the top of the organization and you have givers at the bottom of the organization in terms of performance. And the interesting question is, what distinguishes the givers at the top from the givers at the bottom? I mean, both groups are nice, both are kind, both are generous, both teach, they help, they contribute. What distinguishes givers who perform well and givers who don't? The distinction is that the givers at the top also give themselves. They also take care of themselves. And by doing so, they're able to sustain giving. By doing so, they're able to perform at their best. But if they don't take care of themselves, they pay a high price.
Yeah, that's so important and so overlooked sometimes.
Very much so. You know, and parents very often overlook it. So, you know, so they're there for their children. You know, children right now, especially if they're at home and, not seeing their friends and they're struggling, we're there for them. And that's great. We need to be there for them. At the same time, we also need to be there for ourselves, which means saying something like, sweetie, I'll be with you. Mommy or daddy will be with you in just a few minutes. Right now I'm exercising. Or right now I need some me time. And it's okay and it's important to do, it's essential to do that, whether we're helping our children, whether we're helping a colleague, whether we're helping someone who's in psychological need.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that, Tal. Thank you so much. And I'm going to look into some of the, there is a question that says, are there any activities that boost happiness more than others? And another person, because this might be related to that as well, it says, how can you become happier in pandemic times? So,
yeah. When we talk about happiness as a construct, we need to look at it on 3 different levels. We first need to look at it on the universal level, which means that there are common elements to happiness that you find in Mexico or Colombia or Kenya or China or the US or Germany. You find them all over the world. They're universal. For example, we all need relationships, and that's a very strong predictor of happiness. For example, we all need a sense of meaning and purpose. And it could be something at work. It could be raising a family. It could be investing in my community. It doesn't matter, but we need a sense of meaning. We all need exercise. It's a very powerful predictor of happiness, whether it's in the pandemic or pre-pandemic or post. These are universal elements. Then there are also cultural elements. And they're, Latin American culture is different than North American culture, or Mexican culture is different than Peruvian culture. There are differences, and even more differences with, Chinese or Kenyan culture. And it's also important to study that, because certain things that will contribute to happiness in one part of the world will not contribute to happiness in another. So when we study happiness, we need to study the universal and we need to study the cultural. There's a third element that we need to study, and that is the personal. Because there are 8 billion different people with different needs on Earth. Yes, they have common needs. Yes, they share needs with people from their culture, and they also have their personal needs. For the first 2, we have research on universal factors, research on cultural factors. For what my personal needs are in terms of happiness, we have me search. And when we ask the question, what can I do during the pandemic, or what can I do in general to increase levels of happiness? What are the things that most contribute to happiness? I'm asking, what are the things that most contribute to my happiness, or to my child's happiness, or partner, or friends? And there are the universal, the cultural, and the personal. Relationships matter to everyone. But in Latin America, relationships are even more emphasized than in North America. And for you, Arlen, it's different kind of relationships, a number of relationships, and depth of relationships than the next person sitting next to you in the same culture, in the same global village. So we need to address this on 3 levels. What are the things that will contribute to my happiness, given the universal, given the cultural, and given my unique needs? Is it exercise? And what kind of exercise? Is it dance? Is it soccer? Is it walking? Is it walking while watching Netflix? I mean, what will contribute to my happiness? And these are the kind of questions. This is the resolution that we need to go into when trying to determine a way to fulfill our potential for well-being.
So is it okay to say there is no one recipe for happiness, but several models of happiness show us some pathways, like using your strengths and knowing who you are. If you are a person who is very much attuned to feeling grateful, then doing exercise about giving
Right.
thanks, or writing down the blessings that you had during the day can be something that will uplift you very much. But if
Mhm.
you are very much in tune to, love of learning, maybe reading a book or listening to a science TV program can also really contribute to your well-being. Or if you are, as you said, from a country where, partying and being surrounded with a lot of people really enhances your well-being, that's okay. But if you're more of an introvert, perhaps,
Mm.
having a good conversation with one person can do the job. It's raining very hard. I don't know if you can
Mm.
listen. I hope this is not, it will not interfere with I'm sorry, but there's thunder where I'm at. So is it okay to say, researchers have found many different pathways, but ultimately you as a person have to do this journey of introspection and practicing and noticing what really works for you?
Yeah, exactly. I think there were great examples, Arlene, and you have to observe and, as you point out, notice what works for you. You know, Mahatma Gandhi, his autobiography is titled "My Experiments with Truth." My experiments with truth. It's not my finding truth. It's not my ultimate truth. It's not the truth. It's my experiments with truth. And I think we can follow his guidance here and experiment with different things. Yeah, experiment with gratitude. Yeah, experiment with, learning new things. Yeah, experiment with spending maybe more time with fewer people, or vice versa. Try things out, see what works. This is what me search is all about. This is what experimenting with truth is all about. And over time, we hone in, we find more precisely what is the right thing for us. And by the way, what is the right thing for us today may not be the right thing tomorrow or 3 years from now. So as I mentioned earlier, happiness is on a continuum. It's about a lifelong journey. It's about ongoing experimentation. It's about learning through research and experimenting with me search.
Thank you, Tal. And there is a question that says, what do you think about hedonic adaptation? Is it an eternal rule? And maybe
Yeah.
some people don't know what hedonic adaptation is. So maybe you want to start by explaining that and then answering the question, Tal.
Sure. I'm happy to. So hedonic adaptation is a concept that was introduced by people like Ed Dinner and Daniel Kahneman, psychologists. And basically the argument there is that initially, when there's something that leads to joy or happiness or pleasure, it doesn't last. We adapt to it. So we experience hedonic adaptation, for example, when you know, going on a ride in Disneyland. Initially, it's fun and it's great, but then after a while, it's enough. We couldn't do it day in and day out. Or hedonic adaptation, to give an extreme example, which I used earlier, we win the lottery. We're ecstatic when we win it. We can suddenly buy everything that we'd ever dreamed of and wanted. But that joy, that happiness doesn't last. There is joy, but we adapt, we get used to it, and we go back to our base level. The same in relationships. When we first fall in love, the honeymoon phase, incredible, hedonism. But then in just about every relationship, that high doesn't last, and we adapt. And the question is, what can we do about hedonic adaptation? So first of all, we need to accept that it is part of life, and it's not always bad that we adapt, because just as we adapt to good things, we also adapt to bad things. If we hadn't adapted to painful experiences in our lives, we'd never get over it. And just about all of us probably in this on this webinar, just about all of us have had very, very difficult experiences in our lives, lost people who we cared about deeply. And when we lose them, we just don't know how we're going to continue. And yet we do, because we adapt. So it's a survival mechanism. So how can we maintain this survival mechanism and yet not pay the price of hedonic adaptation, adapting to the good things in our lives? And there are ways. One way is simply by introducing variety. And I'll give you a couple of very simple examples. So doing the gratitude exercise. When we express gratitude before going to bed at night, writing down, whether it's in our notebook or just imagining things that we're grateful for, we derive pleasure from it. We enjoy it. We become physically healthier as a result of it. We become more successful. We actually become kinder and more generous as a result. However, two things happen. First of all, if we write the same thing day in and day out, we stop noticing, stop experiencing the joy that comes from remembering what we're grateful for. So what do we need to do? We need to create variety. And even, let's say I write my family every night, or I write God every night, I also every day need to find at least one or two things that are different. So for example, today I had a very good hummus for lunch. That's something that I don't have every day, but I had it today. Let me think, what else happened today that doesn't always happen? I had a very intimate conversation, deep conversation with my youngest son. It was a very special moment. So I add that to the gratitude. So I create variety with relationships as well. There's research by a psychologist called Arlen, and what he showed was that they took couples who've been together for many years, and they divided them into three groups. One group, business as usual, continue your lives together. Second group, start seeing each other more, start going on more dates, spending more time together. Group three, spend more time together in different ways. Experiment with different ways. Group two, that simply spent more time together, did a lot better than group one, that continued business as usual. Group three did the best because they constantly thought about, what can we do different? How can we experiment with new things in our relationship? So introducing novelty can help. Another thing that can help is simply becoming more mindful. So I may write down, family every single day in my gratitude. But if I close my eyes and I'm really mindful of what my family means to me, then even if I write it 1,000 or 10,000 times, I can still derive the emotion, what Barbara Fredrickson calls the heartfelt positivity that comes along with gratitude. So create variety and notice, pay attention, become mindful.
Thank you, Tal. And it reminds me of Ellen Langer, who defines mindfulness like that, like looking out for a new way, open your eyes to try to find even the same things, but, to really look at them in a new way, in a different way than you usually do. So
it's exactly right. And you can do it with your partner of 20 or 40 years. And you can do it with your room or with the tree on the street corner that you have walked past day in and day out.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you, Tal. So somebody is asking, and please write your questions. We will try to answer as many as we can. And one person is saying, when you're going through a loss, you've lost somebody that you care about, it is very difficult to find, to feel, joy, or to allow yourself to feel happy again. How can you help yourself, or what do I need to do, this person is asking, in order to help myself feel happier in the presence of an important loss?
Yeah. Let me share with you two studies on this topic. And of course, I don't want to trivialize or minimize the difficulty of dealing with loss. You know, I've dealt with it, and many people have, and it's painful beyond words, of course. But let me share with you two studies that actually were helpful for me and for many others. First one is so they took a group of people who experienced loss of a loved one, and they identified two different patterns of behavior. The first pattern of behavior that they identified was people who would say something to the effect of, "I'm going to be strong. I'm not going to let this put me down. You know, I'm going to, go out into the world and do what I did before or even more." And they didn't let themselves be weak because they were strong. That's the first group. The second group, very different. They broke down. They cried. They talked about it. They expressed their sadness and difficulties and hardships. And when people look from the outside of the two groups, they look at the first group, the strong ones, and say, "Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, they're really doing well. I wish I had their strength." And they look at the second group and they say, "Wow, I'm really worried about them. They're not looking good." Mm-hmm. Now, the interesting thing is that a year later, the second group usually is doing a lot better than the first group. 5 years later, even more so. In other words, the group that allowed themselves to experience the painful emotions, allowed themselves to break down, they ended up doing a lot better than the group who kept it together, who were tough. Why? Because inside us, we have an internal healer. Just like we have a physical healer, we have a psychological healer. So, you cut yourself or you hurt yourself, give it time and it will heal itself. The flesh, the skin will heal itself. That's the wisdom of the body. That's the internal healer. The same psychologically. When we're hurt psychologically, we have an internal healer that can help us get better. But we need to let it do its work. If I, for example, sprain my arm and I say, "I'm strong, I'm going to ignore this pain," and I continue to use my arm more and more and more, I will not get over the pain. But if I just let go and I allow the pain to be, then in most cases, it will heal itself. Now, sometimes I may need help. I may need to put something on my arm or to use some medication, but even medication, and even let's say if I put, plaster over it, all it does is it helps the body heal itself. And that's what we need to do. Give ourselves the space to experience the full range of emotions, whatever comes up. And then we're more likely to heal. That's one. Two, and this is research by Jamie Pennybaker from University of Texas. And what he shows is that when people write about the most traumatic experiences, and a traumatic experience is losing someone, no question about it. When they write about it, even if they don't share it with others, just for themselves, no one will ever see it. Just the act of writing, of expressing emotions rather than suppressing them, that in and of itself will contribute over time to healing. Initially, it will raise emotions, will be difficult, but over time, you will return to you will adapt. You will go back to where you were before. So these are two things. I'm just going to mention a third thing, but very often what helps in dealing with loss is creating meaning around it. So, you know, saying, okay, so I'm going to dedicate, you know, a song or an organization or an event or whatever to the person. And that gives it a sense of meaning and purpose. Doesn't make it easy and it doesn't make it good. Still painful, but the meaning in and of itself can contribute to healing.
Thank you very much, Tal. And I think I am actually very touched by many of the questions because, and I think what you're talking about meaning and perhaps adding the component of contributing to something larger than yourself, because some people have, one person said, I live a good life, I am well, but I have suicidal ideation and my life is okay. And another person is saying, I am, 65 years old, and I am so afraid of, becoming older that sometimes I want to die. So how can what can I do to enhance my will to live? And yeah.
Yeah. You know, the first thing, it's important to realize that just as sometimes, you know, when our hand breaks or when, you know, we have a certain illness, the body can heal itself, but it needs external help. And that's when we go to the doctors. And, you know, and they put something on our arm or they give us certain medicine. The medicine then helps us heal ourselves. You know, antibiotics don't heal us. We heal ourselves. Antibiotics help. The same when we, you know, when we put our arm in a cast. The cast doesn't heal us. We heal ourselves. The cast helps. So sometimes we need external help. So that's the first thing. The second thing, there are very few people who have not thought or have not had suicidal thoughts, who have not thought, you know, this is just so bad, you know, I just can't go on anymore. There are very few people who haven't had those thoughts. So that's natural. And that's okay. And just like we have, you know, good thoughts, bad thoughts, you know, we have suicidal thoughts and we have life-affirming thoughts. Thoughts are not actions. So the first thing is not to be overly concerned about these thoughts unless, again, they're so extreme and so severe that they lead us to action. But just having the thought in and of itself, okay, so we had that thought. We can observe it and say hello to it. The more important thing than thoughts, and by the way, the more important things than feeling are actions. Because ultimately, what makes a good person is not what they think or even what they feel. What makes a good person is what they do. And doing is what matters. So I can have difficult thoughts, I can have painful emotions, and still choose to act in a generous way, in a kind way, in a way that contributes to the world, to others, to myself. I can choose to do those things. And that is what constitutes a good life. Now, the interesting thing is that over time, as I continuously act in that way, I will also feel better. I will also think better. Now, will I get rid of those thoughts? Will I get rid of those feelings? No, they'll always be present, but that's okay. They're there, hello, and I can move on. And I can move on and act in a generous, benevolent way. You know, there's a wonderful book, I'm sure it was translated into Spanish, called The Power of Nice. The Power of Nice. And in The Power of Nice, the authors write the following. They say, being nice, which means being generous, being kind to other people, being nice is the most powerful four-letter word we know of. It contributes to our well-being, and it's a lot cheaper than therapy. And I think there's a lot of truth there, because when we start to focus on other people, in the words of the late Christopher Peterson, other people matter. When we focus on other people, that in and of itself helps us feel a lot better and often get these thoughts and these emotions out of us as well, or at least lower their intensity. Doesn't always help, but it often does.
Yeah, it
Giving,
does.
being generous, being nice, being kind.
Yeah, so that answers some questions that are saying, you know, does empathy and generosity some key principles in happiness? And you just mentioned they are.
Very much so.
Another question that says, do you have to take moments to be sad, you know, or do you need to be happy all the time? And I think you have answered that too, in terms of allowing yourself to feel the loss or the sadness or
yeah. And Arlene, we don't need to take it to the extreme. It's not just when we lose someone that we need to allow ourselves to be sad. You know, today, I don't know, 3 times, 7 times I was sad. You know, my son shared with me something, you know, that in that intimate conversation that was weighing on him, and to see him sad made me sad.
Of course.
So what? All it means is that I'm a human being and that he's a human being and that we're connecting. The world would not be a better place without sadness. It would not be a better place without without frustration and disappointment. It would be a boring place without painful emotions. The question is not whether or not we'll have them. The question is, what do we do with them?
Yeah. Thank you, Tal. So we have 10 minutes left, and I know we have lots and lots of questions, which we will try to answer also in writing. I will do, you know, I will do my best to answer all those questions as well. There are some questions regarding techniques derived from positive psychology that could be used to deal with anxiety. So I'm gonna stop there so that you can answer.
Yeah. So what are some of the ways to deal with anxiety? One of the best ways is physical exercise. You know, I often tell my students that I'm the right person to teach happiness. Why? Because I wasn't born with happy genes. While I never struggled with, you know, depression, I have always struggled with anxiety, and anxiety runs in my family. So, you know, all the way going back, not just parents, grandparents, even generations before, from stories I've been told, anxiety was pervasive. And one of the most important things that I have done to deal with my anxiety is become very, very much physically active. So as a child, you know, I played, well, all sports, but especially squash. Today, you know, I walk and I jog and I do yoga and I swim when I can. And I've, you know, my wife, for instance, she can tell if I haven't exercised for more than 48 hours, she always notices. And she said, Tal, did you exercise yesterday? How does she notice? Because I'm a little bit more edgy. I'm a little bit more anxious. I'm a little bit, you know, more curt and less calm. So exercise, I couldn't overemphasize how important that is for dealing with anxiety. And by the way, during the pandemic now, you know, generally people are more stressed. I'm certainly feeling it. I'm exercising more than I usually do. So I usually exercise 3 to 4 times a week. Now I'm exercising 5 to 6 times a week. So I just increased the dosage just like you would increase the dosage on medication in difficult times. It's a drug. In fact, more and more psychologists are talking about anxiety as the wonder drug. Sorry, talking about exercise as the wonder drug of psychiatry. So exercise is one. You know, writing about what I'm anxious about really helps. You know, just a fun study. People who make a list before going to bed end up sleeping better. Why? Because when you write things down, it's okay, you've put it there, you can let go of it. Whether it's the list, the to-do list that you have to, that you're doing tomorrow, or whether it's things that you're anxious about, that you just write down. And that helps deal with anxiety.
Yeah, instead of ruminating all the time, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Instead of ruminating, expressing.
Yeah. So perhaps this will be the last question you will tell me, and then we can share, more about the work you do. But I would like to take up on this question that says, you know, there are lots of extremist groups in our world today, and the emotional expression tends to be radical and negative. Do you have any idea of what we as common citizens, you know, can do to I don't know if you can call it bring down their negativity to a place of feeling more connected and empathic towards other groups, or what would you suggest?
Well, first of all, let me say that the science of happiness doesn't provide a solution for everything. So in and of itself, it's not the solution to radicalization. It's not a solution to the hatred that we see so much of around us today. But the science of happiness can help. Why? Because when you increase levels of happiness, here is what happens. What happens is that, in the words of Barbara Fredrickson, we broaden and build. We broaden and build. We go broad as opposed to narrow, and we build as opposed to break down. What painful emotions do is they get us to narrow and to attack, to destroy, to break. The reason why we see, this is both a cause and an effect, the reason why we see so much hatred in our society is because people are hurt, because people are miserable, because people are frustrated. Now, sometimes being frustrated is the right thing to do, and acting on it is the right thing to do, moral thing to do. But very often that frustration leads to us thinking, okay, I'm right, or my people are right, and everyone else who's outside is wrong. And when I increase positive emotions, when I increase joy and happiness, then I'm seeing more broadly. I'm not just seeing my group, myself, I'm seeing others as important, as mattering. So increasing levels of happiness, whether it's through exercising, whether it's by doing gratitude exercise, whether it's by writing, whether it's by talking, whether it's by practicing meditation, these are all ways to increase levels of well-being, and not just of well-being, not just of happiness, also of goodness. Because you increase happiness, you increase goodness. You increase well-being, you increase generosity. And if you increase generosity and goodness, you also have more happiness. So what we need to create in our society are upward spirals of goodness, coupled with happiness, which leads to more goodness, which leads to more happiness, and on and on. Right now, large parts of society are on a downward spiral, where there is more depression and anxiety, and there is a result more hatred. And as a result of more hatred, there is more depression and anxiety, and more hatred. And this is the downward spiral that so many groups, individuals find themselves in. we can reverse it. This is, to my mind, the most important role of the science of happiness, to create that upward spiral of happiness and goodness.
Wow, I think you just gave such an important lecture for us all. And I think also when you increase positivity, you lower your tendency to do, to do some stereotyping as well. You are more open and more acceptant, and that allows you to listen other stories, to open up your perspective, and to deal with difficulties in a more empathic way. So I think those are wonderful tools, Tal. Thank you so much. And Tal, I would really like for you to share, where can people learn more about positive psychology, about the science of happiness, about your inspired model of well-being, which I think will serve us so much. So I would love for you to share more about the certificate in happiness studies and what you think is needed and will be happening after the pandemic. I think there are many things you can share from your perspective.
Yeah, the what gives me meaning, what provides me with a sense of purpose, professionally speaking, is my work with the Happiness Studies Academy. Our work together. And what this work is about is very simply increasing levels of happiness in the world, and through that, goodness. It's about teaching our students, whom we call fellow journeyers, people who journey with us. It's teaching them to become happier, and also helping them help others become happier. And this is important for individuals who simply want to become happier, or parents who want to be better parents, or coaches, or therapists, or business people, or teachers, or doctors. And we have the whole gamut. And it's important for all of us, because when you increase levels of happiness, what you're also doing is you're also becoming more creative and more productive, and you also become more generous, and your relationships improve, and you become physically healthier. Every positive variable that you look at is improved, significantly improved, by increasing levels of happiness. And this is why I think that the work of the science of happiness is so important. During the pandemic, when people are going through difficult times, or post-pandemic, in difficult and in good times, we can always become happier. And the key here is that small changes, increasing 2%, 3% in our happiness levels, can go a long way in terms of contributing to our overall life experience, both psychological as well as physiological well-being.
Yeah, I must say, Tal, that for me, it's been an honor to be part of your program and to be in contact with so many of our fellow journeyers. And one of the things that amazes me is that a lot of people say that this program really transforms their lives, that they see a before and after effect of the teachings that you teach, and some that I contribute to. And it's really amazing to learn that it's not only about information, it's about transformation. So well, for those of you that are interested, the new program starts June 1st, next Monday. And we have an important discount for all of you who have participated in this webinar. I want to thank you again, Tal, so much for sharing this hour with us, and your wisdom and your experience. And I want to thank Ivan also for the translation. Ale is going to share Ivan's information. He's such an important part of the team. And Arlen, thank you so much for your help. And Tal, I don't know if you have some closing remarks to end this this session.
Yeah, you know, I want to talk about the double standard that exists out there. And what is the double standard? You know, on the one hand, if someone wants to become a good pianist or a good soccer player, they know what they need to do. Yeah, they need to learn about the game, or they need to learn how to play the piano, and then they need to practice. They need to put in the work, and it takes time. And yet, when it comes to happiness, many people believe that it's enough to read a book or to hear a lecture or to attend a webinar or a seminar. And through that, they will become happier. It's not the case. It's the same standard. It's the same factors that lead to success as a pianist or as a soccer player and lead to success in terms of leading a happy life. So what I'd like to encourage you to do is, after you've heard what you have heard, choose one or two ideas from what you've heard and apply them in your life. Practice them on a daily basis, just as you would practice a piano piece that you were given, or a move in soccer that you had just learned, because it's practice that makes excellent. It's through practice that we improve as pianists, as athletes, and as individuals, whether we're working on our happiness or on our goodness. So I hope you join us on the journey towards becoming happier, better, healthier human beings. Thank you very much, Arlen, for putting this together and for all the amazing work that you do.
Thank you, Tal, so much. And thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. It's always a pleasure. And your questions are so amazing. I will really go and look at them afterwards, and I will try to reply with some answers for you. So thanks again, and I hope you join us on June 1st. And once you join the program, you are always part of the community, and you're always joining webinars and new lectures, and it's like a never-ending story. And that's what you were just saying. You have to practice, and this year-long program allows you to forget and relearn and practice again, and see what activities fit better for you. So I really think it's a really nice offering that you've created for the world, Tal. So thanks again. I will let you go. It's late for you, and thank you again, everyone. It's been a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Arlen. Thank you all.
Bye.